Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the fourth part of lecture. I'm hoping to make this your final part of lecture. I appreciate you hanging in there with me. I know the lecture last time in part 3 got a little long. Let's jump in and get it done, right? Let's do language. So language development at this time, there's a lot of different components. We know that there's a huge growth in vocabulary. Children in elementary school acquire about 20 new words a day. That's pretty significant. They do this in a multitude of ways. One of them is by using root words to understand things. So, for example, happy is a root word for happiness. So they're able to expand on their previous knowledge. They also do a lot of reading during this time. So, reading is predicative of vocabulary growth. We know that children who read extensively gain about 4 million words a year, or not gain, sorry, are exposed to 4 million words a year versus children who don't read very much. They're only getting about 50,000 words a year. I say only, still seems like a lot, but you can see that's a significant difference, 4 million versus 50,000. We also know that they're getting integration of more specific words at this point in time, an example being snow. There's a lot of ways to describe snow, blizzards, sleet, whiteout, all of those things are a way to describe the same concept, but they're more specific. At this time, they're also starting to get use of expression, so that understanding that words can mean something other than the concrete definition. Things like you rock doesn't mean I'm calling you a rock, or that stinks doesn't mean I think something actually smells bad. It just means that it's not fun, right? There's lots of expressions we use in our language, and so they're gaining an understanding that words don't always mean the literal definition. There can be a connotation, right? An inference. They also see growth in their pragmatics during this time. And that's because of their growth in their theory of mind, the understanding that you have thoughts that are different than my thoughts, and we all have thoughts happening. Some examples of their growth include sarcasm. So if I said, oh, I love writing papers, somebody in early childhood might think I actually really love writing papers. Somebody in mid-childhood is going to be a pickup on my tone of voice and understand that that is not actually my thought. I'm being sarcastic. They also have an idea that you don't have to exactly say what you want. You can inference what somebody might be thinking or what somebody might want, their intention. If I was with somebody and they had just gotten a cookie and I wanted some, as a mid-childhood to adolescent to an adult, I wouldn't say necessarily, I want some of your cookie, unless I was very familiar with that person. I might say something like, well, that cookie looks really good. And that's kind of a polite way of saying, hey, can I have some? Well, in early childhood, if you said that, they may or may not understand that you want some of their cookie. By mid-childhood, they most definitely will understand that that is your thought and your intention. They're also an ability to have a comprehensive narrative. And what I mean by that is if you ever talk to an early childhood kiddo and you ask them how their day was, it can feel very incohesive and they kind of jump all around, or they tell you a story and they leave out parts that make it meaningful or assist in your comprehension. For example, if I asked an early childhood student about what they did at the park, they might say, I won the swings. And then Jacob came over and we ran. And then, oh my gosh, there was a big hippo and there's a big dog. And I might be thinking, well, wait a second. Was Jacob playing with the dog? Did Jacob have a dog? Because there's all these pieces left out because they're lacking perspective. They don't have that understanding that I wasn't there. I may not have seen everything they saw if I wasn't there, right? By mid-childhood, they have this ability to fill in all the gaps because they understand my thoughts are different than theirs. So if I ask them how their day is, it's going to be very clear and comprehensive. I might say, hey, what'd you do at lunch today? And they would say, well, I sat with my friend Jacob and we talked about going to the park. He said that he really liked going to the park, and they give all those details that are really meaningful so you can understand. There's not a lot of jumping around, not a lot of missing pieces. All right. As you can see, I just kind of included this piece where this around like they really have a sense of what people are thinking and feeling in the meme down here on the right hand corner. All right, I want to talk really quickly with you about bilingual development. There's two types of bilingual development. Those simultaneous bilinguals who learn both languages at the same time. Those are typically kids growing up in houses of parents who are bilingual, or kids that have been born into different cultures and they get it automatically, right? And then we have sequential bilinguals who learn their primary language first and then they get exposed to a new language. The mastery of a second language takes about 1 to 5 years, and this is for children. We can also see that there's code switching that happens. Again, going back to what code switching is, it's this idea that we have an understanding of how to speak in different groups. This can mean that there's a certain cultural way I talk. There's maybe words I use, maybe a certain way I pronounce things when I'm with a certain group. And then when I'm with a different group, I code switch and adjust to how they communicate. Code switching can also be within languages. So I might speak if I spoke two languages, I might speak Spanish to the people I know who speak Spanish and then be able to code switch back to English and maybe even mix the two depending on who I'm talking to. If I know I'm talking to somebody who speaks both language, I might intermix the two. That's code switching, knowing who you're talking to and being effective. There are a lot of benefits for being bilingual. You have denser gray matter and white matter. You have more active prefrontal cortex. That's because you're constantly kind of engaging in the self-regulation and inhibition, knowing what language to use, what words to pull. You have to have attention and flexible thinking to be able to do that. All right, moving on, let's talk about schools, and then you're done with your lecture for the week. We're going to talk about philosophies and practices. The first thing I want to talk to you about when it comes to schools are the different types of classrooms. There's what's called a constructivist classroom, and then we have our traditional classrooms. Constructivist classrooms really view children as active participants. They want them to be hands-on and learning. They approach it by having a multitude of learning methods, such as small groups, learning centers, and they always have individual goals. Teachers are more viewed as kind of guidance and helping them learn their goals and assist them on their journey. And all of the progress is all individualized and measured against oneself. So it's not about making progress towards a standard necessarily. It's this idea of, did you make progress from where you were at? A traditional classroom is different in the sense that the teacher is the main authority. There's certain rules, regulations, decisions all come from the teacher. They're not shared upon in a group. And students typically are just kind of passive participants. They receive information the teacher feels is warranted to learn. The progress is all norm reference. The idea of, we have a standard to meet, we have a test to make, we're going to have that bell curve and make sure that we have the equal distribution of children in the classroom. You can see there would be certain benefits to each. Obviously, a constructivist classroom is going to be more hands-on. Students are going to have more agencies. They're going to be more involved in their learning and probably be more motivated to engage. I wanted to address what's something called funds of knowledge and interest. When we think about how children learn, we know that they build on their previous knowledge. This is important to keep in mind because not all children come with the same set of knowledge or the same, what we would call, funds of knowledge. Different cultures supply different information. And if we can pull information from that child's culture to make it relevant to them, they are going to be much more successful. So we need to be able to utilize their unique culture and background to make it applicable to them and help them be successful. And that's what a fund of knowledge is. So that's why we use it. And then there's a difference between fund of knowledge and fund of interest. So a fund of knowledge might be somebody who grows up on a farm. I might utilize that information and make a math problem about farm animals instead of about riding the bus. Versus fund of interest would be, what are you interested in? If I have a child who's interested in Pokemon, now I make that math problem about Pokemon characters, and then that engages them and makes them more highly motivated to engage. All right, moving on. Student-teacher interactions. I just wanted to talk with you really quickly about some things that make learning more successful, one of them being teacher expectations. Essentially, what an effect size is a measurement of how much progress students make. A 0.4 effect size is 1 year of progress. So anything over 0.4 is significant. We want them to make as much progress as possible, right? So when we look at teacher expectation, it has an effect size of 1.3, which means they make almost over 3 times years of progress when we're looking at teacher expectation. The long and short of teacher expectation is whatever a teacher believes a student is capable of is what will happen. If you have high expectations, they'll meet them. If you have low expectations, you're going to meet them. So teacher expectation is super important. Another one is teacher efficacy. Efficacy comes down to, does the teacher believe that the student is capable, that they're capable of teaching that student? Do they have the skill set necessary to make progress for that student? And that has a pretty significant effect size as well, 1.54. So knowing that's going to lead to some significant learning if a teacher can really believe they are capable of teaching a skill set. All right, the next one is student-teacher relationships. And there are things that go into a student-teacher relationship. They need to include trust, they need to have acceptance, and teachers need to be empathetic. And they also have to have teachers who have a willingness to change to have a positive impact. That has an effect size of 0.72, so still pretty significant, not quite as significant as the other two things, but important for implementation in schools for teachers and students to feel connected. Oh, one more, sorry about that. Teacher credibility, and that's what students believe of the teachers. Do they feel like they are good sources of information? Do they feel like they can learn from teachers? If you don't feel like you can learn from somebody, very much like expectations, you're not going to learn from somebody. So credibility is really important. All right, there's also different ways we can group students in school. So heterogeneous, meaning that we're grouping students based on their skill level, the different skill levels. So if we have a child in 3rd grade who's reading at a 5th grade level and a child in 3rd grade that's reading at a 1st grade level, we may not separate them. We might put them together to learn from each other. What are the implications of that? Well, they have the ability to learn together, but it might slow progress down for both of them because they're not being challenged if we're having to meet somewhere in the middle. All right, looking at homogeneous, that is when we have groupings that are exactly the same. So the children reading at the 5th grade level are going to be together, the children reading at the 3rd grade level are going to be together, and the children reading at the 1st grade level together. But what are the implications of that? Well, there's a lot of segregation, right? We see this kind of high kids over there, low kids over there. And what can happen is that we have a self-fulfilling prophecy, especially for the children who are currently not at where we would like them to be. We see them as lower achieving, so they will be lower achieving. There's not a lot of push to get them higher. It's kind of that, it goes back to that teacher expectation piece. All right, the last one is cooperative learning I want to talk about. It's not so much how we group students, but the idea of putting students together to really learn and benefit from each other. We have cooperative learning. They have a common goal they're working towards, and there's a lot of things that go together. So what are the implications of that? We have a lot of social emotional growth. It typically comes with advanced problem solving because they're having to work through their own issues, and they have a greater sense of agency because they have very sense of control of what they're learning and how they're going about learning it. So there's a lot of ways a different group. I want to talk about 2 teaching methodologies. The first is project-based learning, and that's when we take something the child is interested in, so thinking about funds of interest, and embed a lot of learning within it. Typically, it's a very hands-on activity, and it results in a project or some kind of culmination that the child is able to present and show. We also have something called reciprocal teaching, and that's when we teach something as teachers and then we provide students the opportunity to teach it back to us. And this has an effect size of 0.74, so again, pretty significant effect size. We know it makes a lot of student progress, so it's just something to keep in mind. A couple things to keep in mind around students who have special needs or what disabilities. Special education falls under Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That is a federal law. Any child that has a special need is going to have an individualized education program if they qualify for services. It's a document that breaks down into where are they currently functioning. That's their present levels. Where would we like to see them go? That's their goals. What kind of services do we need to provide that child in order to make those goals? And then where should we put that child in order to give those services? The other 2 things you need to know include free appropriate public education. So under IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, every child is entitled to a free appropriate public education to meet their needs. Part of that is also least restrictive environment, or what is referred to as LRE. And this means that they should be educated with their typical peers to the maximum extent possible. They should not be removed unless absolutely necessary. So thinking about inclusion and being part of the general education environment as much as appropriate, as long as they can get their needs and goals met. All right. With that, we're going to stop here. We're going to come back and we're going to do our watching work. I'll see you then. Bye.